Welcome back to Global Insights. I'm your host, Alex, and today we are pulling back the curtain on one of the most powerful yet least understood forces in the global economy, the U.S. dollar. It's not just the currency of America, it's the invisible lever controlling everything from the price of gas to your morning coffee.
Exactly, Alex. And it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Dr. Ben Carter, and I specialize in international trade dynamics. When people ask me why their imported smartphones suddenly got more expensive, I tell them the answer isn't in the factory. It's on Wall Street, specifically with the dollar's value.
That's a brilliant way to put it. So let's set the context. Ben, why does the US dollar, a single country's currency, hold such an outsized, almost omnipresent power over global trade?
It boils down to its status as the global reserve currency, a position it's held for decades. Think of the dollar as a universal language of business. If a Chilean importer wants to buy machinery from a German company, they don't usually trade pesos for euros.
Right, they convert pesos to dollars, and then the German firm converts the dollars to euros. It's the intermediary.
Precisely. We have the petrodollar system. Oil is priced in USD, and all major commodities like gold and grain follow suit. The data is staggering. Over 50% of foreign trade invoices are issued in dollars, even when the U.S. isn't involved. It's the gasoline that fuels global transactions. When that gasoline changes price, every single transaction on the planet feels it.
That makes perfect sense. Now, let's dive into the core dynamic. We often hear about a strong dollar or a weak dollar. How does that strength or weakness act as a double-edged sword for importers and exporters, especially those outside the U.S.?
It's a classic economic seesaw, Alex. A strong dollar, when the USD appreciates against other currencies, is a huge win for importers. We can think of it as a global discount coupon.
A discount coupon. I like that analogy. How does it manifest practically?
Well, if a strong dollar means my local currency can buy more dollars, suddenly all foreign goods, smartphones, cars, raw materials like sugar or chemicals become dramatically cheaper in terms of my local money. This helps keep domestic inflation in check because imported finished goods are less costly.
So, for any industry that relies on imported inputs, and that's about 80% of industries globally, right? Their operational costs drop significantly. That's fantastic for internal competition.
It is, but there's a hidden risk. If that same importer took on dollar-denominated debt to buy those cheap inputs, and then the dollar strengthens further, the cost of servicing that debt can become crippling. We've seen this destabilize emerging economies before. The debt exposure is the hidden trap.
That's the first edge of the sword. Now for the second. How does that strong dollar affect the exporter?
It's bad news and plain and simple. The strong dollar essentially turns their country into a very expensive five-star hotel. Even if they sell a premium product, say high-quality Peruvian avocados, the foreign buyer has to surrender more of their home currency to get the necessary dollars. The final price tag becomes prohibitive.
They lose competitive ground. If a competitor in another country has a weaker local currency, their product instantly becomes cheaper, regardless of quality.
Exactly. The exporter faces an agonizing choice: raise the dollar price and lose sales, or maintain the dollar price and receive less of their local currency on conversion, which erodes their profit margin.
So the actionable tip for exporters in this scenario is to focus intensely on added value, right? Don't compete on price, compete on uniqueness.
Absolutely. Differentiation is the only defense against a strong currency. Now, let's flip the coin. A weak dollar is the ideal engine for exporters. It's like the weight of their cargo ship instantly decreasing. Their products are cheaper internationally, boosting demand and widening their local profit margins.
That's the moment for growth, investment, and hiring. But for the importer, the party is over and the costs start to rise.
Correct. A weak dollar translates directly into cost inflation for importers. Oil, which is paid for in USD, becomes more expensive in local terms. This leads to a phenomenon we call imported inflation, which is a huge headache for central banks, trying to keep prices stable domestically.
It makes you realize how interconnected we all are. And speaking of interconnected, we can't talk about the dollar's strength without discussing the Federal Reserve, the Fed. Many people see the Fed as managing the U.S. economy, but you argue it acts as the global capital flow switch.
It does. Its primary tool is the federal funds rate, its benchmark interest rate. When the Fed decides to raise rates, a restrictive policy, it makes dollar-denominated assets like U.S. bonds instantly more attractive.
And what happens next is the tsunami of capital you mentioned in the paper.
Precisely. Foreign private capital floods into the U.S. seeking that higher, safer yield. That massive demand for the dollar significantly strengthens it. For emerging markets, this signals a dangerous capital flight. Money is pulled out, causing their local currencies to depreciate sharply.
So a Fed rate hike doesn't just affect the American mortgage market, it simultaneously makes dollar-denominated debt more expensive globally and raises the cost of essential commodities like fuel for every country on the planet. The impact is asymmetric depending on what the country imports.
Right. A country importing inelastic goods, like essential medicines or fuel that the population needs regardless of price, suffers far more than a country that exports high-technology goods, where the demand is less sensitive to price changes.
Fascinating. So let's wrap this up with the practical application. For our listeners, whether they're consumers or small business owners, how do they survive this constant currency volatility? What's the action plan?
The number one rule is never trust your business to currency luck. You need an active strategy.
What's the most direct tool?
Financial hedging. It's essentially insurance. For an importer who knows they have a $100,000 payment due in 90 days, they can sign a forward contract with a bank to lock in the exchange rate today. That eliminates all uncertainty about the future rate. Stability and predictability in trade are often more valuable than optimization.
That's financial hedging. What about operational hedging?
That's about smart engineering. You can diversify your inputs, seeking suppliers in countries whose currencies aren't tightly linked to the USD. Or, for companies with both import and export operations, they can simply net their cash flows. The dollars received from exports go straight to pay for imports, minimizing conversion exposure.
And I remember your anecdote about the software company that started paying a portion of its local employees' salaries in dollars when the currency weakened. That's a clever way to create a natural hedge.
It is. It perfectly aligns the company's costs with its revenue stream. The key takeaway for everyone, Alex, is simple. The dollar cycle is constant. As a consumer, understand that a strong dollar is the time to buy imported high-value goods like a new car or electronics. A weak dollar is the time to prioritize domestic goods.
So stay informed about the Fed and apply the strategies, hedging for business owners and smart timing for consumers. Dr. Ben Carter, thank you for demystifying the invisible force that is the U.S. dollar. This has been truly insightful.
My pleasure, Alex. Hopefully, we've given everyone an economic compass to navigate the global marketplace.
Absolutely. And that wraps up another episode of Global Insights. Until next time. Sound, short professional podcast theme music fades in and then fades out.